IVM.
Welcome to Absolutely Right. I'm your host Aditi Surana. Our guest today is one of the radio jockeys I used to study back in 2006 when I was preparing for my very first radio show. Hrishikesh Kannan, popularly known as Hrishi K, is a producer and presenter on RadioOne's primetime show Good Morning Mumbai. He's also a podcaster and an anchor on some online platforms like moneycontrol.com with his bi-weekly show Investocast with Hrishi K. Besides being a multiple Promax and RAPA award winner for Best Radio Jockey and Best Radio Program, he is also the National Training Director for Radio One. On this episode of Absolutely Right, we speak about what made Hrishi K fall in love with the audio medium. What did he learn when he failed at his most promising opportunity? And what can you do to break your repetitive patterns that are driving you crazy, making you frustrated? A novelist, Zadie Smith, once said, "Every moment happens twice, inside and outside, and they are two different histories." In today's earnest and vulnerable conversation, Hrishi K opens the doors for us to introspect our own personal histories. I can't wait to start. He will join us on the other side of this short break. Stay tuned.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another week on the IVM Podcast Network. If you're not following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Paytm Money. Some really fun guests on the network this week. Cyrus welcomed Dia Mirza to come and have a conversation about all kinds of different things. Danny Morrison was on Edges and Sledges, the cricket podcast. If you haven't heard that, that's always a fun listen. And Raul Subramanian was on Football Shitball to grow their ever more exciting list of guests. And it's not just that. Mantra Mugdha, old friend of ours, was on Advertising is Dead. Manu Pillai was on the Filter Coffee podcast. It's been one great guest after the other. And with that, let's get you on with your show.
Hi Hrishikesh, thank you so much for being on the show. I'm so excited to have you. And I must, before we even talk about anything, I want to talk about your handwriting. And when you created the sample, you wrote your favorite poetry or I think lyrics of a song. What is it about? Please tell us.
Well, this is an artist called Sting, and he's very interesting because musicians normally only concentrate on the music when they're in studio making music, and it's about the song. But he's actually a poet. His real name is Gordon Sumner, and he used to actually teach grammar at an English school in the United Kingdom before he became a full-fledged musician. And he grew up in Newcastle, which is it is a shipping town, and his father used to be a shipbuilder. They used to make these big ships. And he started writing these poems. So then he takes those poems and he makes them into music. At least this particular album of his called The Soul Cages. And this is really one of my favorite poems from that. It's called The Soul Cages, and he likens his soul being caged. He likens his soul being caged to that of a shipbuilder in a shipyard. And he talks about how, sometimes you never grow up. You're always a boy child. And, sometimes you're locked in a fisherman's yard. And in the night, when there's a bloodless moon, where the oceans die, which is when the oceans come, how the waves come and then they just crash on the shore. And a shoal of night stars. Now, normally it's a shoal of fish, but you look up into the sky and you see a shoal of night stars hang fire in the midst in the chaos of cages where the crayfish lie. So, the crayfish are caught in cages and there's a lot of chaos in there. And then, this boy child looks for the fisherman and he says, where is the fisherman? Where is the goat? Where is the keeper in his carrion coat? And then it goes on. So, I like it. That's one of the poems I like. Another one that he wrote was, it takes more than combat gear to make a man. It takes more than a license for a gun. Confront your enemies, avoid them when you can. A gentleman will walk but never run. It's one which he wrote called Englishman in New York. So I could go on and on about it. So that's the first thing that came to my mind, his poetry, Sting's poetry, and I wrote that down. And then you said, I should write another piece, which is just what I was doing in the middle of a working day. And that's the chaos of a working day.
So as a handwriting sample, we cannot take something that you already remember. It has to be spontaneous, something that comes in the moment. It could be mundane, it could be really meaningless, but it has to be unplanned, unprepared kind of a sample.
Sure.
But for a moment, when you're talking about the poetry, I felt as if I'm listening to your show, Hrishi K. So it was like so interesting. Just like, the voice can really transform you and you mastered it. So how did this happen? How did this whole journey begin for you?
Well, it's one of those things. I could call it karmic, and also the fact that I was willing to give new things a chance. And that's something that continues to the day. I was doing lots of theater during my school days, and wanted to continue in that vein in college. If you ask me what I would do if I wasn't doing or had the radio career or the audio podcasting or voiceover career that I have right now, I would have gone to the National School of Drama and trained to be a theater actor, because that was my love for the stage. But parallelly ran my passion for music. I was the mixtape guy in school.
Okay.
So if a guy wanted to impress a girl, wanted love songs, he'd come to me. If a girl wanted, to understand, what the latest rock hits are, I'd make her a tape.
Nice.
And then when I came into my first year of college and I passed out a 12 standard, I was still working in a theater group. And one of the guys in the theater group said, look here, and mind you, this was the mid-90s.
Right.
There was no private radio. Private radio in its truest form came into this country only in the early 2000s.
Right.
Before that, there was a government radio station, which is All India Radio FM. And on that, there were a few people who were renting hours from the government. Okay. So the Times of India rented a few hours, and on the same 107.1 in Bombay and 102.6 in Delhi, they used to run a few hours and called it Times FM. And the midday bought a few hours and called it Radio Midday. Okay. So you'd actually, on the same channel, when the jingle used to change, you used to presume the channel has changed.
Right.
Yeah. And this friend of mine said, why don't you just go and give it a shot? And believe it or not, at that time I said, radio? I mean,
why would I do that?
Who listens to the radio?
Right.
Which is quite blasphemous if you ask me now. But I did, maybe that's the, I wouldn't say the arrogance of youth, but, not knowing too much. Of course, I always heard my mother talking about Amin Siani and the Geet Mala and, a previous generation that grew up on radio. But for a 90s generation kid, it didn't mean anything, But then when I walked into that studio for an audition and they had asked me to write a few patches, Aditi, they had said, write a 90-second talk section on current affairs, write a 90-second talk section on a fake phone call, write a 90-second talk section on a fake interview with a celebrity.
Okay.
And I wrote that and I said, this seems easy enough.
Yeah.
And I put on those headphones in that studio and they had also given me some songs to play, and I sat there on that chair with my headphones on in front of the mic, and I tell you, it was like falling in love for the first time. It was like being swept off my feet. Absolutely being swept off my feet. Because here was something that combined the performing arts, which is theater, and music. And, I was getting to do that and impact people's lives. And believe it or not, at that time, for a 17-year-old kid, it was fabulous to be told you're going to get paid 500 rupees a program. और 500 रुपए क्या होते हैं आज के दिन में यार? But those days,
a big thing.
It was a massive thing. So I was like, dude, I'm on for this. Let's do this, So that's how it all started. And then, I worked for, like I said, a private player who was renting from the government. Then the Information and Broadcasting Ministry turned around and said, this landlord-tenant kind of arrangement can't continue anymore. They, asked the private guys to stop broadcasting, and then it went back to being All India Radio.
Right.
People lost their jobs or moved to other professions, but I said I want to continue doing radio, so I went and worked at Akashvani here in Churchgate.
Okay.
Because I said, I can't see myself doing anything else. And I did, and I continued working in the radio. And then, of course, private radio came, the government floated tenders, and then for the last couple of decades and more, it's been smooth sailing. So, smooth sailing on the whole, if you look at the project, the macro picture, But of course, there are challenges every day, as you would know, Aditi.
Of course. So you now head the training department, and you actually train new RJs and teach them this new language. So how is this? Like now, this role, you must be realizing their anxieties and their journeys and their inhibitions to approach this medium, isn't it?
You know something? I was one of the earliest people who believed in academia.
Right.
Let me give you a classic example. So I finished college, and then I come from a very straight-jacketed Tam-Ram family. In my family, there were always people who were highly educated, doctors, research professionals, engineers, lawyers, civil servants. If you got your PhD, you were considered normal. And obviously, it was a bit of a trudge for my parents at the time. Of course, subsequently, they're incredibly proud with everything that I've achieved right now. But you must understand that for a kid starting off in the mid-90s, when he goes up to his parents and says, this is what I want to do, their first reaction was, what? You want to become an announcer? Because there wasn't even a term called radio jockey. All this RJ and radio jockey are very recent phenomena. Back in the day, a radio presenter was known as an announcer. Now you think of an announcer as like platform number 4 pe falani gaadi aa rahi hai, But radio presenters were also known as announcers. And they were like, you want to be an announcer? And I was like, no, it's called radio jockey or radio host.
Yeah.
So then my father said one thing. He said, I'm sure they must have been incredibly worried. Like I said, they didn't know better. And they have nothing to do with the media at all. My mother was a BSc, MSc, B.Ed, spent some time teaching. Then she subsequently did a diploma in small-scale industries, diploma in large-scale industries, and then became director of the CII, Confederation of Indian Industry.
Wow.
My dad was an engineer, then, went to business school, and then eventually retired at the CEO level at L&T, Larsen & Toubro Limited, which is a Danish engineering company. And here was a kid who said that, I want to do nothing like, I want to be nothing like what you guys are professionally. I want to imbibe your personal values, but professionally, I want to just do my own thing.
And want to become an
and my dad said to me, after a lot of friction, he said, at least go and study further.
Okay.
So I write the entrance exam for the Xavier's Institute of Communications here in Dhobi Talas and Xavier's College, and I get into a program which is film, television, radio program, which is a master's in film and television production.
Right.
I topped that class, and this is immediately after I finished my post-graduation, I'm called back as faculty at St. Xavier's College.
Wow.
That was a big matter of pride for my parents. So while I was working, I used to present programs from Monday to Friday. And then on Saturdays, I used to go and lecture, do workshops for not just postgraduate students, where I used to take radio classes. I also did a 12-week program called ABCD, which is Announcing, Broadcasting, Comparing, Dubbing, where anybody could enroll, whether it was, irrespective of your background.
Okay. And which year was this?
Yeah, so I got into academia very, very early. And, I remember Father Myron, who hired me at the time or insisted that I come back and be part of the faculty, would always say that you've got to give back whatever you've learned. Otherwise, the cycle is incomplete. So what I'm doing right now is just an extension of that. Unfortunately, I couldn't continue teaching at Xavier's because my work from a 5-day job has turned out to be a 7-day job.
Really?
And I'm not able to do that, but I'm still imparting as much as I can wherever I am, because like I said, I believe that if you do not disseminate or if you do not help other people with the information that you have, the circle is incomplete. So it's just an extension of what I started, as a student just out of postgraduate college teaching.
Hrishikesh, this is a wonderful journey of really exploring something that nobody knew and nobody in a way believed in when you saw the truth for yourself. I'm looking at your writing and, my question to you, what would you like me to talk about yourself or your personality looking at your strokes?
Logically, I'll just ask you to tell me about my future, but that is not allowed.
Yeah, not allowed at all. One thing that we cannot talk about based on handwriting is future predictions. So
Correct.
anything
No, I understand that. Because there is Jyotish Vidya and astrology, and there is, handwriting analysis. And I understand where you're coming from. I'd like you to talk about me based on the handwriting. And then if I have any questions, I will ask you. So please go ahead.
So first thing that comes to my mind when I look at your writing is this constant need to upgrade yourself. Every time you reach a point or area where you feel you have understood something, you have got your head around it, you really, really figured your way out of that problem, the next thing you want to do is take it to the next level. Take it to the, what can I do? How can I break this boundary? And people find it really disconcerting because for them, they wonder, oh, we reached here after so long, after putting all these efforts. Why can't you just take a break and breathe? So Hrishikesh, why can't you just breathe? Like, what is this obsession about, like, figuring out new challenges all the time?
There was a time where life made me pause. Mm-hmm. And I got into this whole phase of meditation and dhyan, and I took a pause. Mm-hmm. I actually did a bit of art of living. Then I went for Vipassana a couple of times. I started reading a lot of books from Chinmayanand ji as well as Eckhart Tolle, who is a Western philosopher. My father helped because he had an amazing collection of spirituality as well as knowledge of this side of this sphere of life.
Right.
And I was heavily into meditating and dhyan and things like that. But I've realized that that for me it is being a karam yogi. There are different types of yogis in this world, right? All of us are yogis. Even you have that potential. I have that potential. Yeah, everybody who's listening to this has a potential. It doesn't mean you have to be a sadhu, sant, mahatma. Sure. But, there are people who indulge in dhyan yoga, which is, kisi cheez pe dhyan karna. There are people who indulge in bhakti yoga.
Right.
Kehte hain na ki Meera ji Krishna Krishna keh ke khud hi Krishna ban gayi.
And devotion is a part of those people. True.
Which is bhakti yoga. And some people do hatha yoga. They exercise. They do physical yoga. And some people are just, karam yogis.
Right.
And they are happiest when they're just working.
Right.
I'm not saying I was unhappy when I went and did meditation and at that whole phase of my life. And it lasted a few years, mind you.
Okay.
It's not easy to go for a, 9-day vow, silence and Igatpuri.
I do a lot of these retreats.
Yeah.
Totally understand. It is challenging at so many levels.
You've got to leave work and actually spend time on yourself,
yes.
And you could argue that, hey, you've done that in the past. Why don't you yearn to do it right now?
Yeah.
I do sometimes, but I've realized this is the way it is. Instead of trying to mold life to the way I want it to be, I feel this is the phase where I need to react to what's happening. And at the same time, keep innovating. Like you said, it might be disconcerting because people say, yahan tak to pahunch gaye yaar, abhi aaram karo.
Right. Which is a generic idea. People really want to achieve and become successful so that they can take a break and they do nothing. And here you are, the more you achieve, more you explore, you want to go to the next level and explore new things all the time.
Yeah, people are turning around and saying, oh my God, this is a time for pausing and reflection. I'm busier than I ever was before because I don't have to, for example, if I've called you to have a conversation with you,
right,
or I've called Abhishek Bachchan or Amit Saad, I don't have to wait for 3.5 hours for them to come to Parel.
Right. So,
to do that interview.
True.
I'm achieving more. I'm knocking out 5-6 a day, doing what you're doing, which is having conversations on software. People are more receptive and they have more time to come on, So I'm busier than ever before. Also because very early on in my life, I have a fully functional audio studio at home. So even before this whole lockdown hit,
you were already all prepared.
I was already ready. When they said, guys, it's going to be work from home. What all the other radio presenters were like, what? Arey, kahan se mic laye? Kahan se sound box laye?
Right.
Kahan se ye kare? I said, dude, I'm all sorted. Tell me when? From tomorrow? Today? So, because I realized very early on that I have a 5-hour daily program, Aditi, on the radio from 7 to 12, 5 full hours. I don't talk continuously for 5 hours because it's not full talk radio. I play songs in between, but it's still a 5-hour shift.
Of course.
I can't just say I'll go away for 1 hour and come back.
True.
I have to be there.
And
then I realized
fully being present and delivering is, and so many other hours of preparing for that, isn't it?
Present is the word. Present is the word. So, yeah. And then, after that, if I was to go to 5 different places to do super and kichamkar, zyada safed, or denim for the man who doesn't have to try too hard, and, things like that, then I'm going to run out of steam. Right. So I said, fine, I'm not making truckloads of money, but whatever little money I'm making, I will invest back into trying getting the right audio boxes, processors, sound booths, MacBook Pros, microphones. And I did that, and, touch wood, the voiceovers continued happening from home.
Right.
And then all I needed to do was load a new software for the radio. Not a new one. I mean, in the sense it was there in the radio station. I had to load it here. And I'm just synced to a central server and boom, the show goes live 7 a.m. till 12 noon right here from my study. So, yeah, innovating, not breathing right now.
Congratulations on that one. My God, this is so amazing because most people, what they're struggling with at this point in time is not having their occupation the way they knew it. And here you are already ready.
Blessed. You're right. There's somebody a couple of people who are friends who work for streaming services.
Yeah.
And they were like, dude, all the A-list, B-list actors are calling us for podcasts.
Right.
Because they've realized that they can't go out and shoot during the pandemic.
And they have to do something.
And, podcasting is one thing that you can do from home, from the confines of your house.
Right.
And we're getting calls, and obviously, I don't want to take names here, but these are all mainstream stars who are turning around and saying, and I have no problem with that. Everybody should explore this beautiful world of podcasting that you're involved with, Aditi. But my only problem is don't do it for 4 weeks and say, oh, once the lockdown is over, I'm going to go back to my day job and I'm going to go back to shooting. Then you leave your listener hanging on because after 4 or 5 episodes, they're expecting more. They're yearning for more.
True.
So do it if your heart is in it and do it for weeks and weeks and months and months. If you're saying, I will take my gear to shoots and even on location, I'll come back into my hotel room and I will bang out an episode, more power to you. But to say, I just want to do it now because I want to make an extra buck. Yeah. That's not the way I go through life.
I believe a lot in the audio medium because it gives you the space to imagine. And the reason why we thought we should analyze handwriting, which is such a visual thing, on an audio medium, because we felt that gives you the space and breather to ponder and think about your own self. And if you have someone's face in front of you, and if I'm showing you a stroke, then you're so engaged with it, and you're not doing the introspection, which is the main part of a conversation like this. While hearing your journey, we all are thinking about our own journeys and where we explored. And that is so beautiful. I think power to you, Hrishikesh. So beautiful that you are totally exploring this and committed to do that.
Thank you.
A part of you that very few people are aware of, like as a person, you are very, very engaged and highly intense when you do anything. But a part of you where you are a highly emotional person. When you are engaged with something, you also get affected by it, or you get passionate or upset about it when things don't go the way you have envisaged them, because it matters to you. And when people do not deliver the way they promised or the way they thought they could in the initial conversation, you really, really feel upset. And I'm using the word upset because it bothers you. It matters a lot, which definitely creates a lot of misunderstanding with people because they wonder, why are you so high-strung about it? You're high-strung because you are invested. You're high-strung because you are really, really giving your heart and soul to every project and every idea that matters to you. I wouldn't say every project, but every idea that you take up as your baby, you're all there.
Wow. That is so on point. I don't know. You think that's a good thing? So
I feel that's a good thing for your connection with your work, definitely. But people do not understand your internal journey. So I would highly recommend that you have to find ways in which you can translate this experience for them to understand it. Because mostly they don't understand your priority and they struggle with it. And they're not trying to dismiss your emotions, which actually is how you feel, how you experience that interaction. They're not trying to dismiss what you're experiencing, but they do not know the language that you speak. They do not understand this high intensity involvement and commitment, and which becomes a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, I look at all these guys, and bureaucrats and politicians have mastered it, haven't they?
Mm-hmm.
They have so much ठहराव, कुछ भी हो जाए, आय से ताय हो जाए, दुनिया पैंडेमिक आ जाए, लोग मर रहे हैं बेचारे. But if you see bureaucrats and politicians have that, हो रहा है.
I don't know about ठहराव. I also feel pretense. I feel,
yeah, whatever, and you sometimes look at them and say, why can't I also, take it, flow like this and just be still.
But lucky you, because pretentious stillness is of no use to anybody. Lucky you that you cannot do this, and that's what makes you so intense with what you do. Probably what we have to strive for here is actual stillness, because what politicians or celebrities do is they behave as if they're not getting affected when they are. Whereas there are some people, and I'm sure you have met some of them, who really can hold their calm ground even when things are going off. Now that journey, though it is a difficult one, is what one should strive for, because this is where the self-exploration happens. And I must say this, and I know it's our initial conversation, we are speaking for the first time, but I'm going to take a liberty and make this comment. I feel last few years, because you're not getting that intensity and involvement into things, or if you don't, as you're not feeling that satisfaction that you felt by experiencing the moments which were eureka moments for you, you're distancing yourself. You are doing things, but the journey is more internal. You're busy, you're occupied, you're doing whatever is required of you, but there is a part of you which is definitely looking for, I would not say higher experience, but more intense experience. And I know you're already doing high intensity work, but it is not about how intense your life is. It's about what you expect from it, and you want to take it to the next level. And this is what I can definitely see. So,
क्या बात है यार, तुम तो कमाल हो.
Thank you.
तुमको तो मतलब you should be elevated and kept on a pedestal. Oh, wonderful. I mean, I just think that you're very intuitive, and obviously you're trained to understand emotions from the writing. But yeah, all of what you've said is so on point. There's no two ways about it. Right. So what is the solution now? Are you saying that I need to find time to meditate?
No, actually, it may sound like that. So what you did is you took meditation and you went to the deepest end of it, and you jumped there, and you realized that is not for you. And
that's not for me. Yeah.
Now, when you are completely functional, there are some meditative practices that can create the balance. Because as a person, though you master communication and you love, playing with words and the impact they create, as a person, you're definitely, and I would not call you an introvert, but you're driven by internal exploration. And that matters to you. If you listen to a song, or as we began the conversation, when you read a poetry, you literally go in the nuances of it. And if you can't savor that, if you can't go to the depth of it, then you do not feel energized by it. And that is very introvertish trait. I would not call you an introvert, but introvertish trait for sure. So anything that can get you to explore the deeper parts of you will be really helpful, because right now that part, the balancing part, the other side is not being explored, and you're being externally driven, and no matter how strong you go in that journey, it is not giving you the depth, and the depth will only come from you exploring yourself.
Yeah, but the shorter form, people say do this 5-minute ka, 6-minute ka, ye wo. It doesn't work for me. I need to do those long sessions, and I don't have time for the long sessions. So you're right. Maybe I need to look for it and then not be so hard on myself and say, "Okay, isme bhi itna matlab doob jana hai." Yeah. Meditation mein.
My meditation teacher once told me that doing meditation is like going to an ATM and withdrawing money. And when you go out and buy things and shop around, you require that cash to spend. But if you don't have that cash, if you keep spending, you'll only spend on credit, and one day you have to pay. And that day, if you don't have the wherewithal to do it, you feel exhausted. So it's an everyday practice. So 20 minutes a day, not 5 minutes for sure. I haven't come across a 5 minutes quick fix. I am not a big believer of app meditation, but whatever technique you have, if you go like 20 minutes or half an hour, that would really help. Because right now, it's a strong statement I'm making and I'm aware of it, but there is a part of you that is running out of steam to constantly give without recharging. And that recharge mechanism, if not meditation, something else. We do that through graphotherapy. We do that through different ways of going about. But you do require recharging for sure. We can't avoid it. So what solution? We probably require the best possible solution. Some people find it in exercising. Some people find it in really listening to music or spending time by themselves, gardening.
Right now, I'm finding it in food, which is not a very good thing. सब काम खत्म हो जाता है रात के 1:30 बजे, हाँ?
Wow.
और then you go and raid the fridge, which is terrible. So when all else fails, there's food. That's wrong.
Always. So Hrishikesh, what would be, over to you, I want to ask you this question. Which is your favorite failure?
My favorite failure. Two of them. And they happened very, very early in my life.
Okay.
Actually, there have been so many, but anyway. So I was part of a reality show, and I've never talked about this. I've just had in the recesses of my mind for a sports channel.
Okay.
They were looking for a sports presenter.
Right.
And I was the only guy who had the kind of experience that I did.
Right.
I'd already started, this is, the early 2000s. I'd already had a few years of radio behind me. All the other participants looked up at me and said, wow, man, this guy's going to win. And sure enough, I made it to the final.
How old were you?
Good question. This was 2001. Yeah, so I must have been in my 20s.
Okay.
And everybody expected me to win. I worked really hard. I was so passionate about sport. And I really felt that was the next phase of my life.
Right.
I can continue doing radio and I could present sports programs on the TV.
Wow.
Like the Harsha Bogles and the Charu Sharmas and all these people that, the non-cricketers who do sport. Yeah. And I reached the final and there was a malfunction in the video teleprompter, in the sense that it wasn't really a teleprompter. How do I explain it? So what happens in news broadcasting sometimes is you cut to a visual feed. For example, if I say, hey, we caught up with Harbhajan Singh and here's Harbhajan Singh at the nets practicing. Harbhajan Singh ka video bajna chahiye.
Right.
Aap samajh rahe ho meri baat?
Right.
That's what sports broadcasters do.
Right.
And that didn't come on, and that kind of threw me off for a second.
Okay.
It turned out to be a technical glitch. And they said, okay, fine, let's do this again. So I said, okay. And this time around, they actually stopped the video because they wanted to see how I react. But I thought it was a technical glitch all over again. So it's like you and me are recording, Aditi, and a technical glitch happens and you say, oh, I'm sorry, Rishi, there's a technical glitch, let me do it again.
Right.
And the second time around, there is no technical glitch, but you stop the recording.
Right. So
I also stopped, saying, hey, you stopped again, And they say, no, we purposely stopped it this time because when you're on a live broadcast,
you can't.
What happens if your feed goes off? Whatever you might be doing, whether it's county cricket or IPL or whatever it is.
Right.
At that time, there was no IPL. I'm just saying the example they gave me, the Olympics or whatever. So they wanted to see how I react to that situation, but I thought it was just a malfunction again. And that was heartbreaking because, the guy who eventually went on to win it then got to go to Singapore, work with a sports broadcasting network, experience the joy of talking to all these sports people and things like that. So it took a long time to get
and why is it your favorite one? Like what did you learn from it?
I learned that no matter how hard you try and how much you're invested in something, there will be certain circumstances that are out of your control.
Right.
And you try not to blame. The problem is that we are constantly trying to blame circumstances and feel sorry for ourselves and angry. So that's something I learned very early on. And then
great lesson to have as in the beginning of your career.
Beginning of my career. And then I had a very steamy fight with somebody who owned a radio station. I mean, he had hired me and we had started broadcasting. I was really invested in him because when private radio started in this country, all the big guys, which is the massive radio networks, all came to me and they wanted to hire me. But I went with a small guy, a small player who wasn't even as big as these guys. Subsequently, unfortunately, that radio station shut down. And, I said, because I believed in his passion and his vision.
Right.
And again, the folly of youth. It so happened that I was not there at a meeting and he said something very obnoxious about me. And I made the mistake of bringing it up at a party and we got into a really, really heavy argument,
Okay.
And then he woke up next day in the morning and I woke up the next day in the morning and he said, we should part ways. And he was obviously the owner of the radio station and he could get away with saying whatever he wanted to. I learned very early on that, people in power and people who occupy important chairs, there's a way of dealing with them. And the way of dealing with them is not to scream, shout, yell, even if they are screaming, shouting and yelling. You make your point in a stern manner if you feel you're being mistreated or ill-treated.
Yes.
And you move on. But I indulged in verbal exchange. I indulged in some kind of violence or unrest, which is something I learned early on.
And how beautifully you're saying this. You're saying that it is not about what happened or what I did, but it's an internal journey where I allowed myself to indulge. Which is the cause of this challenge.
I mean, कोई पत्थर फेंक रहा है, ये है, वो है, जो बोल रहा है. So, if you again say, and parties are wrong places to bring it up. Another thing you need to understand is you need to, have a closed door meeting with somebody.
Right.
You don't bring it up in a public place, in a party and, let things get out of control. I mean, even though in that party I said, let's move away and start talking, but then, it's just the wrong place. So there's got to be a time and place for resolving arguments or discussions. So often life can throw you into circumstances which have nothing to do with you. Nothing at all to do with you. And that's the time when you've got to take a strong stand. And my stand was standing ground from one incident, the other, not to overreact, and there's a time and place for everything. And of course, the first one is there are situations or circumstances beyond your control.
True.
And you've got to stop playing the blame game and you've got to stop feeling sorry for yourself or angry at those circumstances.
Thank you so much. It was so vulnerable and so raw, if I may say, as is, and that's so beautiful. Thank you so much. I know for many people it's so tough to share such deep experiences.
Yes, it is, and it's done.
So, Hrishikesh, last question for you. What is your favorite go-to mantra or quote or statement that you remind yourself of when you are in situations like these?
Oh, wow. The gentle and the mild shall inherit the earth.
Wow. That's so beautiful. Wow.
The gentle and the mild shall inherit the earth. Every time I'm wronged, I'm pained, and I want to react and give back, I say the gentle and the mild shall inherit the earth. It's a struggle, but I managed to do it. I don't remember the last time when I've completely lost my cool and yelled or screamed at anybody professionally or otherwise. Life is a work in progress, Aditi. You know that better than anybody else. You learn your lessons and you go on. So the gentle and the mild shall inherit the earth. One thing I do need improvement on, and, if you are able to help, please, I'm all ears, is forgiveness. They say that the route to true happiness and bliss is forgiveness and true forgiveness. If you hurt me, I find it very difficult to forgive you. And that's not a good thing. Not for the other person. Who cares about the other person? The other person who's hurt you. Because they obviously don't care about you and they're heartless, But I wish I was able to forgive more. What do you make out from my handwriting on that?
So I feel forgiveness comes from a space of having clarity. Most of the time it is not about forgiving the other person, but we constantly carry around the burning coal. Probably the statement was one statement, and not necessarily because the person is heartless, but probably because that time that person was hurt and that person lands up saying something that is really hurtful for you.
No. Sometimes they just do it out of spite. Aditi. Sometimes there's no cause. You just see these people and they just like being nasty. They derive some kind of evil pleasure. And I'm sure you've come across people like that.
Of course. And, my point to that, and every time it happens that somebody wants to put you down because they are insecure and they are dealing with all their emotions, I have this small principle, Hrishikesh. I feel if something is on my plate, if somebody is behaving in this manner or some situation is put on my table, how I deal with it in that case, and I believe that one needs to work at changing the world in a gentle manner. I feel it's up to me how to deal with it, and my ability or my choice to respond to the situation is about how I look at it. It's not about the other person at all. At the end of the day, when I sit back and I look at all the situations, I'm going to remember how I reacted, not how that person dealt with it. If we remember so many heartbreaks, we remember so many challenges, we only remember what was hurting, what was bothering, what was really troubling us when we dealt with that situation. And that story, to my mind, is very, very important. So every time I have gone through an emotional journey and felt I was wronged or people were not respectful, I come back and I ask myself, what story do I want to tell myself eventually? And in that moment, it's really tough. You want to blame, you want to fight, you want to really, really be as nasty as these people are. But then that part of you which has that commitment, how you said, I would show up no matter what. I would pop a pill, I would do whatever it takes, but I would show up because it matters to me. Similarly, I feel it is showing up to your own emotional journey. So no matter what people throw on your table, how you deal with it remains fundamentally your processing, your interaction, your choices, and your responsibility in your internal world, not external world. I feel at times you require tact to deal with outside world, but it is a part of it. It is a small part of how the whole thing interacts with ourselves. So when you cannot forgive, and for all our listeners also, when you're struggling to forgive somebody, we have to go down and find out what is exactly hurting still. And if it is hurting, that means we don't have enough tools, mechanisms, ways, perspectives to look at that situation. And that's why it hurts so deeply. And the very moment we change our perspective, the situation remains. We cannot change people. And that's my favorite belief. I believe everybody who wants to change, they can change when they decide, but you can never change anybody. So if we can't change them, the only choice we have is to build our mechanisms to deal with our life in a gentle manner.
Interesting. And also what happens is when you tend to forgive people, there's one of the biggest fears is they will come back and hurt you again.
Yes.
With new people, you at least don't have that fear because your relationship is not dictated by a past pain or past hurt. My problem with forgiveness also is the fear of this person will do this again to me. That's skepticism. So then what I do is I say, instead of diving into that and constantly having that in the back of my mind, saying, will this person do this to me again? It's better to just maintain distance and, just cut away. So, why forgive at all?
But it is exactly how we would look at learning curves. How you master learning curves. So emotions also have learning curves. So because we did not know how to deal with this particular person, or if you remove the personality, and I do that a lot looking at the traits. So if I remove the personality and if I look at the trait box that is talking to me, what trait is bothering me the most? And that trait, and you would have seen this, we keep repeating the lessons in different shapes and different people and different situations if we don't have a resolve for it. So if one person's particular attitude gets to you, you'll find different people who come and press the exact trigger that otherwise you're trying to avoid. You don't want anybody to press that red button, and somehow somebody sneaks in and figures a way to press that button, and then you experience the same thing. Now, going back to the point I was making, if we know how to deal with it once, if you know how to face the mic or camera once, it might be very difficult initially, but once you hack it, you have the hack, and no matter whether that person shows up or other people with same trait show up, you know how to deal with it because you have hacked the emotional learning curve, which to us is very, very important, but we are not taught this. It's not that we do not learn. We are not taught this, how to do it. And that's why we constantly keep avoiding the situations we cannot tackle. So I feel every person who gets to you is a learning opportunity to look at what else do you require to still work on.
Good. You must send me this podcast so I keep listening to it.
I will send it to you. And I think I really loved some parts of our conversation so much where so many times people, when I really want to go deep and speak about certain aspects, people back off because it's uncomfortable. Yeah. And you kept on giving me the space to explore it and dive deeper. That's beautiful. I thank you so much. Thank you.
If I could veer this conversation towards very purely material directions, and if you would allow me to ask about future, I would ask you a question the whole world will ask you. When are we going to make money, Aditi?
I think this is some sort of challenge that we are supposed to, as I said, deal with it and figure a way, all the things that we thought came so easy are taken away. So challenge, next 1 year, full challenge is what I think, not predicting based on any writing, just what I'm preparing myself for every day. 1 year, you deal with it. But I also feel, for me, last 4 months have been extremely busy. I've never worked this hard ever. And I feel this has been the most beautiful journey in my professional career and most satisfying. And I wish I would have done this before. So,
yeah, because you always turn around and say, I'm working harder than ever before, but you're not seeing the results in monetary terms. So I'm sure you also go through that phase saying, my God, I'm working so hard. So then you have to shift focus and say, fine, I might not be making, tons of money materially, but, the learnings and the input, the life lessons are far more than money can buy.
True. And I think money requires its own calculation, but we cannot sit and calculate exactly what you can do to get that exact amount, especially in creative professions and even in anything in life. So if we keep these two ideas independent, and if you say, okay, I require money and this is what my calculation looks like, and I require to take care of all these responsibilities, at the same time, when I'm working or when I'm into the process, I keep that thought aside and like, okay, now I'm here and I'm going to give it my best, and not allow these thoughts to intermingle. I feel that is really, really important. And most of us struggle to do that. We just mix it and we make it like one big chunk, which becomes very difficult to then dissect and separate. So I feel that's important.
Great.
Thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you so much.
Yeah, this is fun. And normally what happens is with handwriting analysis, you think that people will turn around and say, you're obsessed with your past, obsessed with your future. You read these books where people say if you're writing slants to this direction, you're obsessed with your past. If you're writing slants to that direction, you're worried about the future. Yeah. So I thought you'd start with that. Why don't you end with that? Look at my handwriting and say, am I stuck in the past? Am I stuck in the future? Or am I creating present moment awareness?
I feel I celebrate like journeys and I love stories and I love people for all the broken pieces that we bring in as an experience. And I wanted to showcase that. And that is the attempt. I feel all the broken pieces are so beautiful. Only if we actually accept and we start celebrating those parts. And that is the attempt. The show is slightly offbeat in that sense because we wanted to create the space of acceptance, space of being gentle, as you said, and not judging. We don't want at any point people to use these tools to label themselves further because we already have so many labels to go around. So the idea is to really figure the deeper parts, which are so beautiful and so amazing. Thank you so much. This was so nice. Thank you.
Cheers. Take care. Yeah. Bye.
Bye-bye. Gentle and mild will inherit the earth. That's so powerful. In many situations, we all wish to choose gentleness and calmness, but we'll end up reacting in a habitual manner. We defend, we attack, we resent, we become egoistic, as if it's all happening without any choice. In my observation, people who know how to respond without giving into their natural and habitual reactions really know how to do relationships very well. Let's talk about this reaction versus respond kind of topic on our Friday short episode. Thank you so much for joining me today on this episode of Absolutely Right. I'm keen to know what were your takeaways from this conversation with Hrishi K. What small action will you be taking today to improve something in your life? Do share your experience and send your questions to me on my Instagram handle at Aditi Surana. If you like this podcast, then don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on IVM Network. You can listen to us on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com. You can also follow us on our social media. We are at IVM Podcast on Twitter and Instagram. Let's connect on Friday. Till then, happy writing.
Hi guys, this is Ayushi.
And I am Ritasha.
And welcome to Agla Station Adulthood.
It's a fun podcast we've got going on, and we'd love for you to tune in and enjoy with us.
Join us as we stop at various stations and discuss different topics that seem to be bothering us and hopefully
Dating,
you as well.
relationships, beauty, just being an adult, lots of different things.
We don't have a great grip on it, but we've done okay so far.
Catch Agla Station Adulthood every Thursday on the IVM app, the IVM website, or wherever else you get your podcasts.
Times have you motivated yourself to improve your sleep or lose weight or be more productive? How many times have you failed? Hi, my name is Ashton Doctor. Tune into my show, The Habit Coach Podcast, where we focus on creating small, tiny habits to improve your life instead of those big, impossible tasks. So make listening to me a habit every Monday, Wednesday and Friday on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com or on your favorite podcasting app.